Before we get started with today's video, I'd like to make out a brief PSA. As you know, in addition to War Thunder, I am also a fan of the indie game from Steam called Bigfoot, formerly known as Finding Bigfoot, developed by Cyberlight. Now, if you follow Bigfoot, you may be well aware of the controversy of them constantly postponing Bigfoot 2.0's release date, and I'm not here to complain about the release date. What I'm kind of complaining a little about, within reason, is that they are refusing, well, I need to choose my words carefully because they haven't officially said we are not going to add an optional beta, but long story short, a beta would tremendously help the developers spot bugs for Bigfoot 2.0 and allow us to get an early look at Bigfoot 2.0. So if you're a fan of Bigfoot and you want Bigfoot 2.0's beta to be released, leave your thoughts in the link below. It'll be linked to their latest dev blog where you can show your support saying, hey, we want Bigfoot 2.0 to get an optional beta. Or, as I would personally recommend, you can email them directly too. Their email will be listed in the description below. Anyway, let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. Howdy folks, Sauber here. Welcome back to the channel. Want to apologize in advance if you were a little inconvenienced by the little PSA. I tried to keep it as short as possible, but as was mentioned in the PSA, a beta for Bigfoot 2.0 would be very helpful. I'm not going to stay on that subject anymore because now we're on War Thunder. It is finally here. 1.77 has arrived, along with the M1 Abrams you see here. So I'm going to be talking about how, despite its shortcomings, if played right, the M1 can still be a very fun tank to play, and a good choice to buy if you are able to buy this vehicle. Now, I know that probably sounded a little weird, but let's face the facts, and Fly touched on this a little bit in his recent Abrams video. It's not going to be the strongest dog on the block like we see not only in real life, but also in movies. This is the early M1. This isn't the renowned M1 A1 and the more modern M1 A2, including its SEP variants. This is the very original M1 Abrams from 1979 and 1980. So, it doesn't have the strongest armor or the best gun. I mean, the M1 A1 was quickly introduced less than 5 years later in 1985. Now, I do wish we had the M1 A1, but now don't quote me on this because this is just speculation, but we might get the M1 A1 in the near future. I don't know if it'll be a 1.79 or 1.81. We'll just have to wait and see. But let's start off with its main contender, the gun. The standard M1 is equipped with the modified M68 cannon, the M68A1 variation, and it can fire APFS-DS, Heat-FS, HESH, and Smoke. Its best round being the Tier 4 modification, or excuse me, the Tier 4 M774 APFS-DS shell with 415 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters. Now, I may be wrong on this, but according to one of my friends on Discord, this is a DU round, a depleted uranium shot. And if you saw my M1 discussion, which featured the MBT-70 gameplay, I linked you to Napalm's, at least I think it was Napalm, his video on the M1 Abrams, where he in excellent detail described what a DU shell is and how it works. And so, yeah, at least we do have a depleted uranium shell for the Abrams. But as good of a round as it is, if you're not like, or let me rephrase that, if you prefer to grind or just can't afford to boost your Abrams and get that tier 4 shell, you have to deal. Now, I discount the heat, and I'll explain why in a moment, but the default shell, or default APFSDS, the M735 shot, has only 360 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters. Now, of course, that is the Tier 4 shell for the M60 A1 Rise P, but here's the problem with it. If we look at, let's start at the other MBTs that were added in 1.77. I don't count the AMX30 because, one, I don't have it, and I don't really know too much about it to give it an accurate statement. Having said that, I would prefer to focus on the tanks that I am familiar with, even if I don't have them, which include the Challenger 1, M1 Abrams, T-64 Bravo, and Leopard 2K. Again, I'm not saying that the AMX-30B2 is a bad tank. I'm confident that it's a good tank when played right, so just take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, let's get back to it. Let's start with the Leopard 2K. Now, I know I can already hear you screaming, it has the most powerful shell in the game at the moment. Well, yeah, one of the most powerful shells. I think the most at the moment. That is the DM12 Heat FS shell with 650 millimeters of pen at any range. Now, as good as a shell as that is, it can be stopped by the Challenger 1's turret and possibly the M1's turret. Like, I haven't been hit in the turret by a Leopard 2K. I've been hit in the hull. I've been hit on the upper plate and the lower plate and the side, but not the front of the turret. So I don't know for certain if it'll go through every single time. It might, but then again, it might not. Its next shell, or I'm looking at the wrong one, is the DM13 APFSDS shell. Now, I understand that's not a stock round, but it's still fairly good. The DM13 shot, and it has 417 millimeters of pen at 10 meters. That's only 2 millimeters more than the Abrams M774 shot, but nonetheless. Next up, we go to the T-64B 1984. Its stock 3BM15 round can penetrate 440 millimeters at 10 meters. So that is second only to the Leo 2, the best stock shell available for the new MBTs. And then also a little honorable mention, well, I guess you could call it that, it's Cobra ATGM missile, the 9M112 ATGM can penetrate 650 millimeters of armor at any range, but bear in mind, you can only carry a certain amount of those missiles and no more. Now, I don't know, I can't recall if that limitation was done for balance reasons or if it's reflecting historical standards. I don't know. But I want to say the count is 5 or 6. I don't remember the exact number because when I was watching Fly stream, or excuse me, his dev server video, he only had like 6 ATGMs loaded up on the T-64B. And finally, we have the Challenger, which has a stock APDS, not an APFSDS, but a standard APDS shot, the shot L15A5 with 412 millimeters of pen at 10 meters. Now, I haven't used regular APDS that much since I got the MBT-70, which was back in 1.71. Yeah, 1.71. I already forgot what month that was. But I know it was in 2017. Anyway, I do not know exactly how well standard APDS performs in comparison to APFSDS, but nonetheless, it does have a good penetrating round. And then, its best shell, this is also for the Challenger, the shot L23A1, which is a tier 4 shot, can penetrate 440 millimeters of armor at 10 meters. The same penetration as the T-64B's shell. The T-64B's 3BM15 shot at 440 millimeters distance and 400 millimeters at 2,000 meters. And on the, interestingly enough, the Challenger 1's L23A1 shot at 2,000 meters has its penetration value doesn't decrease as much as the T-64B's and can penetrate 420 millimeters of armor at 2,000 meters. So it is a little better in terms of overall distance. So for the M1 Abrams, I'm kind of curious as to why it doesn't have the M774. Ugh, I can't talk. M774 shot as stock. I can't complain too much because I have that shell and it performs well for me. It's not the best shell, but it performs decently to my liking. So now let's move on to its armor. On the turret, it has 400 millimeters of effective thickness for kinetic and 650 millimeters of effective thickness for chemical. On the hull, it's a different story. It used to be the same as the turret, but now it's 380 millimeters of effective thickness against kinetic and 600 for chemical, meaning that the Leopard 2K can easily go through with its stock round, the Challenger 1, but then at the same time, in realistic battles, you don't really face the Challenger 1 if you're playing as the Abrams, but you do in arcade, as well as other Abrams. And the T-64 especially can go through the lower plate with ease, and possibly, or not possibly, it can also go through the turret at essentially any range. Even the Abrams' own M774 shot can penetrate itself, and when I say penetrate itself, you can use the Abrams with that upgraded shell to penetrate another Abrams armor, whether it be the turret or the hull. So in a way, kind of reflecting on how Fly remarked on the Abrams, it's kind of be like a light medium tank. And when I say light, I mean light in terms of mobility, medium in terms of armor. Because, as mentioned earlier, it has the smallest gun among the other MBTs, and the thinnest armor. It's good armor nonetheless against most other tanks like 8.0s, but it's generally not the best against its peers. And if you go by my playstyle, that's okay, because I'm used to the Leos, I'm used to the KPZ/MBTs, I'm used to having light armor and relying only on speed, agility, being able to shoot first, and being able to spot the enemy before he spots you. Would I like to have stronger armor? Absolutely, who would not? But at the same time, you can't just randomly buff or nerf the armor. Now, I mean that with a grain of salt, because on the dev server, the armor values were a little different on the MBTs, and the way I see it, it wasn't done because, or only because of balance reasons. I don't know the exact reason why it was done, but if you want to think realistically, it was because they're going through sources, because these are so far the newest, and when I say newest, I mean most modern tanks we have in the game. The T-64B being from 1984, its model that is, and the AMX-30, from what I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, was produced until the late 90s, till 1995. But then at the same time, the T-64B as well as the AMX-30, I want to say the AMX-30B, were basically original models with lots and lots of upgrades. And yeah, I get stuck on this rock, rip me. But the Abrams and Challenger 1 are new tanks in themselves. They're not upgraded M60s or Chieftains, but they're new tanks in themselves. And yeah, as you saw there, I got my ammo racked, but I survived. Thank goodness for the blowout panels. They're so helpful. anyhow, so could we get more modern, and when I say more modern, I mean tanks that are even more modern than the M1 Abrams Challenger 1? I don't know. We might be getting the M1A1, as I mentioned earlier, but I don't know what its armor values would be, if it would be like the standard M1, because from what I recall, now I could be wrong on this, but from what I heard, there were some original M1s that were upgraded with the 120mm cannon, which was an early version of the M1A1, and then the production M1A1 had its even thicker armor. But at any rate, could we see like the Challenger 2, the T90, the M1A2, I mentioned Challenger 2 didn't I? Well, frankly, I don't think so. Because, like, remember in my other video with the MBT-70 talking about the M1 Abrams, I said Chobham was still classified? I found out that I was thinking of the new Chobham armor. Apparently there's a newer one being made. Or when I say being made, I mean being made now. But the original Chobham from the 70s and 80s, that has been declassified, apparently. I did not know that. So that's most likely how the M1 and the Challenger 1 were able to be modeled accurately in, well, somewhat accurately in War Thunder. Nothing's ever 100%. That's what I meant to say when I said not entirely accurate. So, so having said that, I don't think the tank manufacturers would just simply let Gaijin go in and say, hey, can we get some information on the armor values so we can make those tanks in-game, because many of them are still classified. Would Gaijin take the approach well, not to say, but like add those vehicles anyway and just come up with rough estimates? I kinda don't think so, and here's why. Many players are like major accuracy buffs, and when I say accuracy buffs, I mean that they want the vehicles in game as super accurate as possible, from collision physics to ballistics to models to performance accuracy, the whole 9 yards. And there's nothing wrong with that, to want something that's as realistic as possible. But at the same time, you have to understand this is a game. And even if it was a full professional simulation game like X-Plane or that sort of thing, even then, they're not 100% accurate. Because in the flight simulation videos I've seen, like professional flight simulators, they take a different approach. They trade graphics for physics. Well, what do I mean by trading graphics for physics? Well, to put it in simple terms, the more performance you have to accurately simulate physics, the more demand it has on the machine, or that is the computer. So, to make room for more realistic physics, you have to tone down the graphics to like late 90s, early 2000s graphics. Perhaps even less detailed. So anyhow, all in all, when it comes to the matchmaker of these vehicles, let's move on to the matchmaker, I think that to a certain degree, overall, the M1, along with the Challenger 1, have the best MM for RB at the moment. Now, of course, this is very early. Not everybody has the new MBTs, although it seems like there's a lot of Abrams and Challenger 1s, and yes, that IT1 was able to pen me by aiming for below my turret. Such weak spot, and unfortunately, before I could somehow wasn't able to pen his turret. I think you know why. Just kidding. Then a Type 74, or excuse me, an STB-1 snuck up behind me, distracted me just long enough so that before I could get my shot, On the IT1, he somehow got my breach, and my buddy just abandons me. No, I'm just kidding. Either he simply didn't know where I was, or he wasn't paying attention, or he didn't speak English. No pun intended. But yeah, you can't win. And when I was saying that the M1 and Challenger 1 get decent MM, I don't mean it 100% of the time, but a majority, it's actually rather decent. Because in the battles I played with the M1 in realistic battles so far, they've been really decent. Of course, there have been times where we've steamrolled or got steamrolled, but all in all, I am happy with the Abrams. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all the support. Stay tuned for part 2, where I discuss its performance in arcade. So until then, have a great day. Peace out.